Okay, get started. Good morning, Warren. How you doing? Rambling Geek. Good morning. Or good afternoon. Nice. Nice. Oh yeah, school closing, right? Okay. A little sleepy, but overall excited for another great day to be a developer. Nice. That's a good way to approach the day. So I've been coding most of it. Good job. That's awesome. Okay, so I gotta up this productivity a little bit. So um okay. So let's start off with some good news. So yesterday on yesterday's stream, what I was trying to do is figure out how to basically add a security layer at the gateway level, right? So Auth0 gives me tokens. So I authenticate with Auth0 and it gives me a token. But because I want to do tenant-based permissions, that doesn't help me with Auth0 because Auth0 supports tenants, but in their RBAC model, you really need to handle permissions, multi-tenancy permissions yourself. That's the way they even tell you in their documentation, right? So how do I do that and I do it relatively securely? So what I was trying to do yesterday is basically create a new token for here so that it would be used all along here. So the Auth0 token would get unloaded at the gateway level, and I would take over and do the token-based authentication, authorization here. What I was hitting was it just wasn't working. The token wasn't working. The reason I wanted to keep the token-based process in place is because, it gives me I do not want to do custom anything. I don't want to go into the realm of, oh, well, I'll do custom authorization, etc., and build in facilities that aren't there, are not present in other frameworks. And I want to build my own custom stuff because the more I do that now, the more this platform becomes temperamental to change in the future. There's no benefit in deviating from using an existing set of libraries and tools and building my own in there at this phase. It's just too much of a problem. And if I change out the auth model later on, if I change out, how those tokens get there or whatever, then I have to rip out all the custom stuff and reapply platform stuff. So the problem we're having is the token that I built here, and you can see that here, this JWT builder. So basically, as a request comes through the gateway, I get the user and the tenant from that request if it's authenticated. If it's not, it'll just forward that request. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not an authenticated request. It'll get the permissions based upon the tenant and the user identifier. This strips the Auth0 piece, so it just gives me my GUID. And then it will union in the sub and the tenant information back into that new token, and it will build a token with that set of permissions. And those are claims, essentially, right? So it gets the permissions claim, so that's actually claims, essentially. Right? It will pull that, and it will build a new token based upon those claims, and then pass that as the bearer token, so that everything here gets that token. The problem was, it's a token, and I was validating the token, which means that it was expecting a server to exist to call back and validate that token against. So, when Auth0 comes in here, it has a valid authority because it calls back to that authority to validate the token, right? That's how it secures it. But if that's not available, you can't authenticate. So, what I did was, after talking with Mojo, we were kind of going through and like, oh no, I've got to create an identity server behind the wall for this to work so that a user gets registered in it. And then when they're registered in it, when this gateway comes along, it will have to authorize that user again. And that gives them an internal token to move forward. So the only time you do that, but I don't want to get deep into the weeds of auth. That's not where I need to be right this second. And the reality is, once you're at the gateway, everything behind is not public anyway. So no one can make a public request to tasks. No one can make a public request to tenant management. The only way you get to tenant management or tasks is through the gateway. So the gateway has to have that auth, and that auth token can't be built, because if you don't make an authenticated request, you can't send the authenticated request to get even further. So I'm not panicked about that design right this second. So what we did is we removed the validation here. And then on this side, we basically say, don't validate. And that provides the ability to sorry, my wife got a text from a friend this morning that said the power was out all over the school district. We don't live in the same area as a school district. And she just got to school, and they said due to a power outage, we're going to have a 90-minute delay. So she's at school and now has to wait an hour and a half to start school. Oof. So yeah, we remove the validation. So we don't actually try and validate this, because what was happening was this authority I was passing in, it was trying to call that authority and say, hey, have you got all the right configuration? So with that in place, if later on we decide to introduce an identity provider internally, the mechanisms are there. We don't have to worry about hard coding. Did I say good morning, Mojo? Sorry. Yeah. Oh man, I think I need to shave. So that proves that concept out, right? Yesterday was the first shovel of the year for us. We still haven't gotten nearly as much snow as just about the rest of the eastern half of the US. Well, we only got a couple of inches of snow. If that, it's pretty much all gone now. In Jersey, in southern Jersey. Bisako, hello. How you doing? So yeah, it's not been bad here. Okay, let's close that one down. So realistically, what I need to do right this second is to get this working. We need some sort of, I've labeled it as security, and I label it as security here, because what we need is basically a system that will allow me to configure and set permissions on a user, and that will store those permissions and then provide a local system for this to validate against. So when we make a request in there, I'm going to put some Redis in here as well. Right. Right. So basically, put in a layer of here so that when we come in with a request, we get a user and a tenant. We say, okay, well, what are our permissions? We load that token up with the permissions and forward it, and then we can just use access controls and whatnot down the line, and that makes things a little easier. If there's any questions, thoughts, opinions on this, more than welcome to discuss it. What we're going to do right now is going to go through and add some of the stories necessary. I'll then copy these parts out so that I can build them. Build them properly and commit them accurately. So, but these, these in general do work, which is good. It does mean as well that I can get rid of. I don't need auth 0 stuff in the rest of the application, right? I can remove the auth 0 stuff and just trust that I'm going to get my own token. This secret doesn't matter either now, so I don't have to worry about secrets right a second. And what it highlighted to me was the fact that I know so little about identity, authentication, authorization in general, um, because I just haven't had to do it. So, understanding some of those patterns, maybe that's a focus I put on myself to go off and do some training on, understanding a little deeper. But at least with the pieces in place, it's not impossible to add in later. So yeah. Um, there's too much to be an expert in all of it. Exactly, yeah. And it does highlight the fact that, well, what I'm doing here, I'm not going to be able to do all this on my own, right? Once it gets to any, like, it's getting to the point now where a single component of the system will take me quite a length of time to do, which means other parts of the system aren't moving forward. Having help, you building this as a solo developer is now to the point where anything that's major, like this piece will probably take me several days to build, right? Okay, that's 2 hours on stream every day. Um, but I can't be an expert in every single piece. I won't be an expert in every piece. And it's kind of, again, why I'm building it this way, because if someone else comes in and can contribute, then they can build certain pieces and I can work on other pieces and but we can always change things later. Suriname, thank you very much for the follow-up, by the way. Welcome in. Um, if you are new to the stream, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. If you have any thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing, um, more than welcome. Hello. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the tool to document out some of the ideas here. So to document some of these things out, start to plan these things, and then build out the actual components. So if you haven't seen it before, this is the Liquid Sky product that we're building. Right now, we are able to add planning items, do tasks, do sprints. So what I'm going to do here, yeah, true. It's 2 hours on stream and talking about it as I go. So it's not necessarily, um, yeah, but yeah, we'll see. Love the idea with control supplements. Nice. Um, thank you, online. Um, yeah, I love video games. I'm a collector of consoles and retro stuff, retro games. So they seemed appropriate for, especially considering my name. Okay, so you know what I need to do right this second is plan out some of these pieces. Now this is actually one of those areas where the actual user, um, from a planning perspective, from a product perspective, the footprint of the the visual aspect of this is actually the smallest part of the entire thing, but it's the only thing that allows anyone to verify things are working. So as a product manager, as a system administrator of a Liquid Sky tenant, I want to be able to set the permissions of a user. I want to be able to assign roles. I want to be able to assign, so you know, I want to be able to assign individual permissions. I want to be able to assign roles if permissions roll up there. Please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Majid. Hi, how you doing? Welcome in. Um, so that's the only thing that, and other than I should not be able to perform an action if I'm prevented, right? Those are the only things that really can be validated from the user's perspective, from the user of the system's perspective. But there's so many more pieces. And this kind of goes into why I'm building this the way I am, right? So if I was to go and generate a planning item that was basically a permissions screen, right? Or apply user permissions or something like that. To be able to do that thing, there is many, many tasks, many components that make up doing that. So, you know, it's uh it's pretty difficult. So let's do it as that. Um and we'll see how it feels. And again, using the platform to build the platform so that we can kind of see this, demonstrate this time and time again. Um, so yeah, we'll see. I've always been bothered on how to implement a transaction when interacting with multiple services, especially if there's an error about the previous calls. Cross-service exception hand. Oh, cross-service transactions are they're not something I'm supporting right this second. It's something I've considered. What does it mean? The way that this system is designed, it really wouldn't be that big a problem. So I wouldn't need to have that. Like, I'm not using commands and events to tell other parts of the system to do things right now directly. They are kind of so the way this system is designed right now is planning owns everything revolving around planning. It owns the data. The API writes the data in there. It publishes that as an integration event to say this data has been integrated, do what you want with it. So I'm not publishing any intent to the larger system. Um, and then the other components of the system, you know, um, access that data. So, sorry, I'm just validating my. I'm not expected to. Um, yeah, so when I produce a planning item, this system owns that. If any other component of the system doesn't receive that for whatever reason, um, a scenario that I'm going to go through eventually, figure out what that means. If this doesn't save, if changes doesn't save the planning item or tasks, doesn't get saved in the view because of an error, should this roll back? Well, no, because this has been secured. So for me, it's more about event replay than it is a transaction necessarily there. Um, so yeah, cross cross service transactions. Um, I'm not sure that if I have a use case for that, but to even demonstrate that sort of behavior. But it is a difficult one because you've got to basically react and make the system kind of alert, send the right messages back and forth if you're using messaging. If you're using APIs to communicate between services, then yeah, that's that's a little harder. Topswag, hello, how you doing? Long time, yeah. Are you going to divert me again, Mojo? Or is that basically just validating what we talked about? That's a lot of stuff to read. What's the TLDR? So again, if you are new to the stream, if you have any questions, or if you're not new to the stream, I should just start that. In general, I am open to discussion. I want to talk about this stuff. Um, well, probably a solution. Okay. Um, I'm open to talking about this stuff. If you have thoughts or opinions, if you disagree with what I'm doing because you think there's a better way, I'm always open to learning and growing that way. What I'm doing is my solution, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll take rather than try and hunt down and think there's a perfect solution, implement something. It's better to implement something than it is to sit in indecision because you'll just get stuck, right? You'll get stuck, you'll get bored, you'll think that nothing's going to work, you can't do it, and you'll move away. So implement something, and that's kind of what I go with. And again, what I'm trying to do here is I don't want to customize anything, because if I customize, I end up with a solution that doesn't necessarily fit if I want to swap it out later. With what I'm proposing, I can swap things around later. There's no harm. So yeah. So let's go, and I'm really kind of scared to do this, but configure permissions for user as a system, as a tenant administrator. I want to be able to configure the permissions assigned to a user. There is no right solution. We all work towards the best solution at the time given. Yeah, yeah. But I know a lot of people get stuck on like trying to hunt things down and figure out what is the right solution. And you know, yeah, just because something's been done doesn't mean that you can't do something better, or something that suits your needs better. Um, and at least if you implement something, you understand it. So when you see someone else's solution, you might be able to apply it to what you did, and it will help you along. And you can then reflect and say, oh, well, hold on, that's why that's a security hole. That's why that's unsafe. This is why I should do this. This is how to, because implementing different auth, it's its own world, right? Understanding all those pieces. I don't want to introduce identity as a concept. I don't want to build identity out if I don't have to. So that's why I've used auth0, but auth0 does not give me per tenant permissions. I'm building something quite complicated using just basically the ability to log in with someone that doesn't. I don't own the password. That's all I care about. As a tenant administrator, I want to be able to configure the permissions assigned to a user. It's important. Good morning, daughter. How you doing? How you feeling today? On a configure the permissions assigned to a user. I'll label this as description, but the temptation here is to go into depth, but it shouldn't be. It should be kind of the goal, right? Like here's the goal. So let's leave it at that, and we'll set this as review date of 1/10/25, because I want to. This is something I need to turn around on pretty fast. We'll sign that to me. That's the client project. We'll sign that, but right. Let's go here and let's add a requirement. Can so right now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out permissions as a concept, right? Roles are a nice way of grouping sets of permissions, I think. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. But to me, right now, being able to set all the permissions is the bare minimum necessary to get this to function. Roles can come later as a kind of a roll up of sets of permissions, and creating custom roles with different permissions they're kind of like templated permissions, right? In the back end, when we're building features, we'll determine which permissions are required to do a thing. And in all honesty, most of the time it's, can I add this? Can I edit this? Can I list this? Rarely are we going to need the only time I think you need kind of role is if it's general administration, but you can also break that down into permissions. So can add users, list users, add users, right? You might want to allow someone to go into into here and be able to list the users, but you don't want them to be allowed to do anything to the users. For a user, when I navigate into the users list, I want to I want to be able to click uh, uh, be shown. Select user, see permissions panel, see details panel. And we're getting more detail, right? Um, and again, this is the sort of thing as a developer, if you sat down talking with the product team as you're going through this, like, what does it mean to configure? It, it seems like it might seem implied. It might be implied. Oh, well, that means I can toggle it on or off, right? But what does it mean to configure? What do you expect to happen when you configure it? These are things that should be asked. The problem is, as being the developer and the product manager, I'm going to cut corners here because I know what I mean, right? As Mojo and I do more planning on some of these other larger features, right? It will be, important to go through and clarify a little bit more because again, different experience, different understanding of the components, different understanding of like the vision. Like in my head, this app looks amazing and it works perfectly, right? Because I can see further into what I'm expecting it to be. But that said, when I'm building these items out, I'm still going to cut corners. Not not necessarily deliberately, but like to me, oh, I know what configure permissions means right there. So it means um, can toggle a permission on off for a user. Should see a notification when, now, do you want to? I think here, toggling it on or off that permission shouldn't necessarily automatically push to the backend. I think you want to save the permissions. Should see save button. The problem here is if I do this format of right hand panel detail thing for the users, this might get kind of messy once the permissions get to a certain size. So we'll have to see what that looks like. Enabled when permissions have changed. Clicking save should disable button and saved. Right. So just now that's configure a little bit more detailed. And again, if I had screenshots, I could attach screenshots here, all sorts of other stuff. We actually noticed there's a bug in attachments. I have lined up the fix. Images do not upload properly. So images don't attach properly because the method of saving. So I actually added a comment with the code that I need to do the save with. This does work and I've confirmed it in a test program, but obviously I want to tackle features in the right order. And being that now the software is deployed to the Kubernetes box, a change a build is a longer way away than just committing some code and pushing it now. So whereas previously I was just bundling features in and pushing them, now I have to make a PR, get it merged in, then push that branch, or merge that branch into development, then merge development into main, or at least create a release branch and merge that into main, um, so that that picks up and then identifies as changes and pushes the new images, and then I can restart things. So there's a lot more process involved, um, than just doing that, right? So we have can view all permissions available for user. Um, user prevent user from accessing based on permissions. Now I'm going to be um, generic here in what I'm saying, purely because it's just too much right now. But basically, I'm going to say, okay, well, certain things in the screen shouldn't show or shouldn't be enabled if you don't have the right permissions. What this is actually the client needing to understand what this user can do. So when I make the actual work here, which we'll get to shortly, the views are going to contain a set of those permissions as well. It's not just the security component. The security component will store it for that user, for that tenant. It will store it in whatever way. Redis will be used to make sure that that is quick on every single request, so that the right token is cached. But the um, but yeah, the user will need to have those permissions as well. Sorry, um, my brain diverted halfway through thought. So from this perspective, user should not be able to view settings. And this is funny because I'm saying I'm going to do permissions, but I'm going to actually um, um, we'll have to figure out the actual permissions necessary to decide whether that button shows, because it's kind of a role. If they are not administrative user, because I'm going to describe a role in this capacity. Um, but you know, in the back end, you have the concept of policies, and realistically, to me, administration is kind of a policy that's made up of a set of permissions. Um, you can roll them up, right? You can roll a set of permissions up into a policy and say this policy is required to be able to access this thing. And I've kind of done some of that already. I don't know how long that will continue on. We'll get to that piece, but it's worth considering. Um, 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 user should not be able to add a task if they do not have the permission. So adding a task is a permission. User should not be able to add a planning item. Um, this story alone, this piece alone, the set of work involved is many stories, and this is where planning items comes from as a concept, right? Um, to the product manager, breaking each one of these out as a story, is it an epic? Not really. Is this an epic? I pretty much, I think it would be an epic in Jira, and these would be individual stories, and then the tasks can go on there. I just don't think it's better than epic. um, yeah. But there's way more involved in building this out. And again, from a story perspective, the stories for this are pretty much all technical. And I think that's where my brain breaks on the whole no technical stories. So the idea being that what I'll do here is now create the tasks that represent the stories. What would we call stories, right? The tasks are representative of the actual work to be done, and the requirement from the business perspective, the business understands this is what I expect to see. How it's implemented um, is not my concern as a product manager. My concern as a product manager is this is what I'm expecting to happen. The but the effort, the estimation of the effort, etc. I should understand what the total estimation is based upon um, on that. And now, you know, that should allow me to better describe this. Um, there's one thing I'm missing, and I can't remember what it is. Um, this isn't login versus not login. Login, you will be allowed to log in because you've got an active user. That's a separate concern. That is authentication. I'm essentially just handling the authorization aspect of this right now. Um, yeah. So to be able to get a list of permissions, um, we need to store them somewhere. So my thought is permissions will be stored in here. When they change, they can publish. So there will be some sort of hmm, let me describe this a little bit differently. So we have the concept, right? Or we are building out the concept of that's that stuff from the day. That's that. That's that. That's that. That. Nope. 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 Control tower architecture. Control tower. That doesn't really accurately describe it. Let's do create new drawing. Platform. So we have the concept of actually let's call this client control tower. Right. So we have Liquid Sky as a platform. There's the client side of it and there's the control tower side of it, right? The idea being that I do apologize if you get stuck behind ads and you want me to wait on this, please. I'm just going to continue on because it saves it on the VOD, but let me know if you want me to pause if you're interested in understanding this more. Um, the idea is the client area. So basically everything in here, right? The client architecture runs in the overall platform, and control tower is a management system, a back-end management system that will allow us to manage tenants, configure subscriptions, configure all those things. It's separate but linked, right? So there's things that will cross over. Now, defining permissions is we could have control tower manage the permissions. So if we want to add a permission in, we can just add it in as control tower piece, and then save it and have it stored in this security component over here. And again, I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm not actually saying this is what's going to happen, but it is possible that we could manage that. Ultimately, though, a list of permissions, so an actual permission label and a name will be required, and then we'll be able to assign those permissions to a user. This component here, this security component here, is what's going to store um, um, the user tenant permission. When we change the permissions for the user, we are going to publish them, and other components of the system will listen to them. From the view perspective, that profile will be necessary. Now, there's two events that will happen. When we add permissions in here, we're also going to have to add permissions in here. So if we don't make a tool or something for that, then the view is not going to get told about them unless we copy them in manually. So, but we don't want to expose a public API. Public API. The API here is not public, but it is behind the gateway, but it is a component of the larger platform. The client is never going to be creating that permission. So to me, there's some aspect of security that kind of I probably should have done some form of Venn diagram there, right? Because it's exactly what that's for. But there's some aspect of security that is potentially controlled through both. So if we want to add new permissions, we add them in Control Tower, and now they're available in the client, but they're only managed at the Control Tower level. The problem with that is, and this is a thing that always gets me, is it's a code requirement, right? Because I'm not going to have so these policies here, right? This policy info is just a set of permissions with a claim. This means that you have to have the tenant claim, and then these permissions are there, right? That's what that is. This will still be the same. I don't see any reason why not to use these. Ultimately, I'm going to hard code these. These whittle down to a string, right? This is just so I can use that string and not have that repeated time and time again through the application. I can just use this structure. But so to develop a new permission, right? Sorry, I'm listening to that just in my head for some reason. No worries. No worries. So yeah, it's at some level there's going to be a hard coded string, there's going to be a string that we assign. So when we add a new feature to the system, this is what I was going to go at. Our definition of ready for a given feature going forward, we're going to introduce a new screen, a new behavior, a new application piece, is does it have a permission associated with it? Right? It has to be asked, right? Does it have a permission associated with it? Is there a set of permissions associated to it, or is there one permission? What is there a new permission, right? If there's a new permission, that needs to be added when that feature goes live. So is putting it in Control Tower even necessary? Because we don't have, like, that permission not being there is not going to break the rest of the system, but unless that permission's there, no one will be able to use that feature, right? Control Tower is the backend system managing Liquid Sky. The piece that Mojo is going to do the work on for now. So it is the tenant management, it is the subscription management, it is the reporting, it is everything that backs Liquid Sky. That's cool. So Control Tower is our management system for the platform. So if we want to add a new permission, then if we use Control Tower to do that, add that permission, essentially we have a feature flag. Because if that permission is necessary for us to access something and we control visibility of that thing based upon your access to something, if that permission doesn't exist, that permission can't be assigned. And therefore, you know, we turn it on when we add the permission, or we turn on the ability to use it when we add the permission, and now the users can be notified. So we're gonna have to practice that. But I think Control Tower does own creating permissions in the longer term. For the short term, um, I'm gonna have to create those permissions lists in both Vue and in here, and coming along there afterwards. So uh, what I'm saying there is there's a Control Tower story later, right, for adding permissions to the platform as a again, this is another actually let's put that out at the 3-month mark. Right. Yeah, that's in our 3-month window because we need permissions in the 1-month window. That's definitely cross-functional. We don't need to assign it to anyone, and it moves into review date. So when I'm talking about the 3-month window, so we did a set of planning, and what we've done is said, okay, there's a 6-month window. These are the high-level things we want to focus on, right? So these are the things that should be in the platform in 6 months' time. We then take those 6-month windows and we move forward to the 3-month window, what we want to work on in the nearer term, right? So we pull those 3-month things out of the 6-month list. On those 3-month things, we then go and brainstorm. We went and did this. We went through this exercise. We went through an exercise. What rough behaviors and features are these things going to have, right? So on the 6-month window, what do we think is necessary? And then we reviewed that and said, okay, these ones can happen in the 3 months. These ones happen in the 6-month window. So these get pushed out a little bit further. And then we drilled down again, and on those items, we kind of went into what does it look like to get functionality in 1 month, and those are the things that are added here, right? The 1-month things are added in here, where possible. This one moves out to June because the internal users for Control Tower aren't valid right this second in that form. But yeah, so this one moved out to the 6 months. This one lives in 3 months because we don't need this immediate. To get this done, I just need to create a list of permissions and then add it into 2 systems. And we can flex that way. Okay. So let's go through this now and do this. Now, it's funny, starting to use the platform, it makes some of those pain points actually appear a little bit um, a little bit sooner. So the tasks, adding the tasks, what you'll see here is I'll add a task and then I'll lose it. So I won't be able to see the tasks I've added. So I'm gonna have to stay focused on making sure I keep the right tasks in place here. The task process, this task workflow, this is one that definitely is UI UX in terms of what it means to add a task. So I'm going to start with the backend pieces. There's pieces that to get that details panel, to get this permissions on off. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so a task is well, that's why I want to find someone who's a UI UX person that can go through this and do this. And yeah, do the bare minimum in the meantime, because it will become a pain point time and time again. This is a pain point. We do have user assignment, assign user on task. That's in the list. That's in the middle of this month. So that once I've got the permissions stuff in there, assigning users will become part of that as well. So the goal is very much for me and Mojo or Mojo and I, to do enough of this next set of features to make productive change. Then we'll push forward that. Does that have drag and drop? Uh, in here? Yeah, he was correct. So, so yeah, Mojo and me. Okay. You show me Type Hero. Um, yeah, but looking at someone else's UI UX is one thing. Implementing that UI UX and doing it effectively, um, yeah, it would be, yeah. If you want to show Liquid Sky to somebody else and see what they think, you're more than welcome to do it. You have access to it. Um, yeah. Morning. No YouTube viewership from you today. Let down. It's a weird conversation. um, yeah. So let's drill into this. So, what task do I need here? So, um, support. Well, we need permissions to be present before we even do before we even get to the supporting the permissions piece, right? So I prototyped out enough here in this piece to say, the authorization can be applied at the gateway. It's not going, it actually isn't that expensive, even this form, but obviously we don't want to put database queries there all the time. Asking them for their opinion. What sets a good team apart from a bad team in terms of the opinions is how, like, um, how do I put this? um, Working on your own, you are an echo chamber. You get to validate your own decisions. You get to throw everything in there and just do stuff. And it's why when you're working on your own software, you don't have to hold to great standards. You can just throw stuff in there and get it done and move forward. Oh, I need to fix this. Oh, I need to fix that. Oh, I need to fix this. Oh, I need to fix that. To work with somebody else, to work with anybody else, you do have to take on not just who does what, but you're not always going to agree upon things. You're not always going to see things the same way. And a part of the challenge is understanding how to like level the playing field. And like Mojo and I have gone through several conversations where I think I've been talking at odds because we've not seen the same picture. And sometimes it's getting that picture into focus from both perspectives to understand that the opinions are based upon the right thing and not on misunderstandings. And it's oftentimes when you're doing planning and story planning, etc. Um, assumptions are made because you have opinions on how it should be done or what is there, an understanding of what is there, and oftentimes we don't ask questions because we make those assumptions and it how am I going here? basically all opinions should be validated and run through. And Jay, hello, how you doing? That's episode. Um, that is episode. Yeah. Honestly surprised we got past the ad create debate. It's it's useful to have debate, and it's useful, but it's always useful to make sure that you understand that opinions are based upon certain things, and you know, um, yeah. Nope, we got at most 2 inches, and then it's gone. That being said, a large area nearby has completely lost power, which isn't good in sub-zero temperatures. Sub-zero Celsius, not sub-zero Fahrenheit. So, add permissions, create permissions. Uh, we're going to call it security right now because is the best way of describing it. Ultimately, it could become other things. We can naming is not worth getting stuck on for great sorts of time. I understand what security means right this second. If later on we discuss it and find out that it's something else, then I can change that appropriately. And again, one of the benefits of doing things this way is these components are self-contained. The things that they accept and the things they produce are the only things that are necessary. Everything else inside of them can change without affecting the rest of the system, and that's kind of why I'm enjoying building this. And yeah, create a security component. In order to support permissions, we need a independent database to hold uh, right. So create structure, create DB, create permissions, SQL. So right now we're going to handle this by creating a SQL script to populate the data. We'll copy and paste essentially that script over to the view side of things to get the list of permissions. Um, uh, ah, no. Okay, sensitive to tabs. I'm trying to be. I'm trying to treat this. I'm trying to treat this as realistic as possible rather than just jamming stuff in there because I know what I'm going to work on. I am trying to follow a flow um, in order to. As always, if you have questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, please feel free to discuss. Um, I'm trying to use the tool to plan the tool, which is what you're seeing right this second. This is necessary because obviously we've got a lot of pieces in place. We need these pieces. So again, yesterday validated that I could apply a new token at the gateway level and then have permissions and stuff carried with that token into the backend, so we can hand off permissions at the gateway, which means we can deal with per tenant permissions. In order to support permissions, we need the structure and to hold a list. Permissions. You can't edit tasks, so create structure, create database, script permissions. Let's do that. So once we've got that, we need to do create API for setting permissions on user, tenant, user, endpoint, add to gateway, produce integration event for user permission. So in terming this properly, so I've been watching a video on Dome Train from zero to hero event-driven architecture. I wanted to go through, validate my understanding, validate my my learning so far, and see if there's anything I'm missing. So far, a few areas where I'm questioning things, but he's using RabbitMQ for the most part. It's not bad. The guy has a very, very broad Yorkshire accent. Worth watching. He keeps saying I'm not going to get into the details of RabbitMQ, but everything he's doing is implemented in RabbitMQ, and he's describing everything in context of RabbitMQ. It does get to that point where, like, to me, Kafka topics are not events. They are a stream of, so to his wording, they are event state-based transfer or something like that, right? Basically, what I'm doing is I'm using. Oh, just listen. You'll understand. Like, you'll understand the difference between him and Rambling Geek. Yeah. So basically, I'm using state-based transfer for events. I'm not using, planning item created, planning item updated, etc. As events, because to me here's the current state of the data. That's all you really care about. I don't care the it's updated. I don't want to create a planning item created, planning item updated, planning item deleted event. There's no extra eventing necessary in what we're doing in Liquid Sky so far. There's no great complexity there. There may come in time things like planning item completed, planning item initialized. They're all kind of the same when you're not from the UK, unless it's really, really different. If you think that sounds the same as like Rambling Geek and me, okay. Yeah, UK accents change drastically in a few miles. Yeah. Your layout makes sense because Kafka is way better at being stateful and has really good query tools. MQ is more like Redis. Yeah. So I'm using this to say, here's the state of planning. Here's the state of a task. Here's the state of tenant management. If it changed, whatever, then it's on the consuming system to determine what that means to it. Like, what does it mean if the planning item status changes from completed to, archived? What does the rest of the system do? Is up to it, not the event. So I'm not listening to the event changing. Now there are service buses in here. There is a RabbitMQ and mass transit in here for doing. Right now it's for sending commands directly to endpoints. So I don't like using, like, send email is a command. It's something I want to tell a system to pick up and do. The fact that a notification has sent or whatever, maybe that's wider scale. But I'm not building any sort of if this was an order system, this would not be the same way, right? There'd be more events there because there's more things for the domain to react to. In this instance, a lot of this is data. There's very little in terms of actual eventing. So I'm using, as he terms it in that video, event state transfer or something like that. Essentially, so my topics are the item; they're not planning item created. And I don't like using Kafka as a service bus. So anyway, let's go back here. What do we have so far? Create security component, create API for setting permissions on tenant user. We need to go and add create view receiver. Actually, create user profile. I'm actually starting to believe that tasks might have more of an association with components. So whereas I've got projects, I think tasks might actually have component level, because here, this is not clear what I'm talking about here. So setting up components such as view, planning, etc., as far as it aligns to the system, might actually be a granularity that tasks benefits from. Off to work. Dota, thank you very much for coming and hanging out. Appreciate it. See you. And catch you next time. Update, create profile, update, view component with receiver for permissions. That will be a topic. User permissions will be a topic. It will carry a user with a tenant. Update GraphQL to provide user profile query. Again, storing the profile on the user on the client seems to make sense. So the idea here being that the permissions would publish from when we change them in the client, we update the permissions for this user. It publishes that, it gets trapped here so that it can apply the permission when the request goes through for the user. It will hold a Redis cache, so it will hold that like for that user for the expiration or whatever. When it changes, it will flush the cache and reload the cache with that user so that the requests are deferred from the database. The view will also store that set of permissions for that user for that tenant, so that we can expose a GraphQL query and get a user profile, which will give it a list of available permissions. Right, and then we can use those permissions on the client, and we'll just use the permission name the same way. I don't think there's a security problem with doing that. I don't think it exposes anything, because again, to be able to change something on the server side, you would need to update that permission in the client to see the screen. Then you'd be able to do the thing, but then the permission wouldn't apply at the gateway level anyway, so it would just reject you and avoid that. So you could do what you wanted to change the view of the client, but it won't give you very much, and it will only give you the list of permissions that you have. It won't give you the total list of permissions on the client. It would, because it would give you the name. But again, as an administrator, so if you're an administrator, you can do anything anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. So there we go. So I think I'm talking my way around that one, but ultimately, the only query you get that has all the permissions available in it would be in an administrative capacity anyway, so there'd be no benefit to you messing with the client. and the client themselves would only be given the permissions they have, and the code would be obscure enough that you're not going to be able to change that. So I'm just trying to think through, is there any weird, like, easy security thing I'm missing there? And I don't think I am. User profile query. And this is a user profile query because it's going to carry the name and other details eventually anyway. Permissions, create receiver for user permissions topic, store permissions the user, update GraphQL to provide user profile query with permissions. What I'm going to do is try and get the word permissions in here more because I don't think I've got it. I don't think we're clear that this is about permissions. Store for user, update GraphQL, provide user profile. There you go. Okay. So those tasks associated to that. Now, prevent user from accessing based on permissions. This is where we need the add security receiver for gateway. And this is not a component of this. This is independent. This is its own set of components. So there's there's a database, so I need a receiver. There's a not an API. There's an application layer with a service. It's a domain service, right? It's essentially a permissions service to say, for this user, this tenant, what am I allowed to do? There's a Redis caching piece in there, so we'll have to figure out where that lives in terms of the pipeline there to make that transparent. But the Redis cache will hold on to this and avoid making the query to the system. And then that would provide the list of permissions back. So there's a few pieces there. Receiver for capturing user permissions. Database. We could use Mongo here. I don't think there's any harm in using MongoDB for this piece. But storing create domain for gateway security. So we need some sort of permissions provider, Redis cache, and we need to, what else do we need to do there? What did I just say? Token build. So yes, I've got the components. I'm gonna store them off, but I do need to build them as part of a clearer, more deliberate design. This is the harder one. Modify end components for internal auth. So create internal auth configuration. Replace auth 0 on all backend components. So all the APIs. I mean, it's not all. I mean, it's not like I'm talking hundreds, but each one of these needs the auth 0 pieces removed and replaced with the internal auth. So it understands that, including the security thing that That's the amusing part. The security will use the security to test the security. Um, Backend components with internal. So with that in place, with these two things in place, I will have a screen to configure the user, service to store that, publish those events, the view receivers in the relevant pieces. So we have a user profile over here and a user profile over here. We do need to do here, we need to, for right now, add permissions script for view until we get permissions into larger system. We need to hold the list of permissions in two places. It's not a technical debt, but it is a debt that needs to be handled. Yeah. Yeah. So, um, um, are you in Discord? If you PM me, so if you go to Liquid Sky Software, and register an account, use a real email because eventually it will work. PM me the email you use, and I will enable the account. Um, so right now we have the planning, we got it configured, we got the users, comments changes. So there's our requirements added. Let's go to the tasks. So these tasks now are created by me. They're not assigned because users aren't assigned. I'm going to use sprints in an odd way here, and I've kind of suggested Mojo do the same. I'm going to create a sprint that represents this set of work because right now I'm not working in 2 week windows. I'm working in as much as I can get done in as much time, right? So I'm going to create a sprint for introducing permissions, tenant permissions. We'll start that today, 01/08, 2025, 9 a.m., say. And we'll finish that 01/15. I'm going to set an aggressive timeline of 1 week to finish this, right? So I've introducing tenant permissions. So now we go over here and I'm going to move all of these into that sprint. Okay. Oh, is that a loading problem? Come on. Eventual consistency is your enemy. Oh, I know why. I know why. I've got a bug there. I have a bug. That's not good. Status. Um, that is a status. I can fix that relatively quickly. Ugh. So the status, nice. Okay. Pending. There you go. There you go. So, yeah, if you DM me your email that you used, I'll add. Um, um, so status is a string, right? So the problem with that is that if you set the wrong string when you're creating the task, it doesn't work properly. So if I go to the tasks here, what I'll see is that the status on these is unassigned. Needs to be ready for development. So I have a natural bug there. He says, but there's another problem. I have a view. So basically, do not assign it to your sprint without setting the actual status. At this point, I need to fix that pretty quick. Yeah. That'll help you. So as you add a task, let's go into there. Let's make sure. As you add a task, assigning a user on a task, what do I know? Adding permissions for platform, comments on requirements. See a button to add a comment. Add API endpoint for comment on requirement. Provide an endpoint to comment as per the planning item. Right. So create that, go over to here now. This dashboard should have that. Now the status is wrong. I need to move this to ready for development before I assign it to the sprint. That's all it is. I just didn't do that. So, I could assign that, right? But I don't want to do that right this second. So if I go to my tasks, go to my sprints, I've introducing tenant permissions. Let's start that. Ooh. Okay. So here's the 7 tasks that I laid out to get done. So let me just review other things I know need to be done and we are working on. So the ability to add comments on requirements and the ability to add attachments on requirements and on tasks, those are useful because they give you more context. So you can have a discussion. You could actually have a set of discussions around the requirement itself. Subscriptions are something that Mojo will be working on. The idea there is that we can get that structure in place so we can start to support user limits and we can support enabling and disabling subscriptions. The task details right now, when you click on when you start a sprint, you click on this, you see the details that you are laid out, but you don't get to edit this right now. This is going to be as it is, right? So this is exactly as I set it. So that the ability to edit that is in the list coming up in the next week or two. Images do not upload properly. We're going to get that fixed. So that will allow me to write some things. So a lot of these things in the next 2 weeks really do give quality of life improvements to the application. But a lot of them are, they're going to get deployed as a bundle. As we go forward into the next 2 weeks, showing the assigned user, have it so you can actually add assigned users. The planning item dependency. There's some bug fixes in here as well that I need to do. I need to tackle. I need to tackle email sending to additional users. Well, registration, corrections. When I register a user, they don't receive the email invite email. So this needs to be done 2025, assigned to me. Client. So that needs to go into ready for planning. So that needs to be planned. Configure user permissions. This one needs to go to in progress. Yeah, there's some quality of life improvements that need to be done over the next couple of weeks. Again, they're going to have to get done as a bundle because deploying these as a set of changes to the Kubernetes cluster is it is going to be time consuming because you're going to have to learn, here's what I'm missing, here's the pieces that aren't working, here's the new scripts that I need. There's all sorts of stuff like that. You know, I need to move that over there. Management. So I cannot show, being that people are signing up for things, I can't show the tables anymore because actual stuff. So I will oftentimes not show the internal database. Hold on, let me move that over there. I have so many tabs open, it's not even funny. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free. If you have any thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing, if you think this is a terrible idea, that is also perfectly acceptable. To understand. So what this step will do, what this piece will do, the reason I want to focus on this now is by configuring permissions within the application, this step that I'm doing right now for testing won't be required. You'll be able to sign up and then just be able to access the application because all your permissions will be valid. I've held off on this piece because I know that I can't do permissions on a per tenant basis in the system. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we I think we're at a point where we can accelerate through some of the features, but there's a lot of little pieces to be added. So once this set of work has been done over the next couple of weeks, I think they're worthy of a deployment because there's a lot of different pieces fixed, and we'll go that path. Okay, so we're in progress for configure permissions for user. Let's move the review date out on this to be next Monday. So the purpose of moving the review date is now these are the things I need to focus on to add information to. This one I want to come back into my view on Monday so that I can understand, is there anything to do on this? Is it actually making progress? And yeah, let's go to tasks. So the developer now, realistically, my day revolves around this piece, right? It revolves around what is actually going to become a dashboard for the developer, right? So when I go here, this dashboard is going to show the developer what they need to work on and what they need to focus on, which is why the add task button appears here. This is for the team essentially to look at. But for right now, this is my workflow, right? Where this is already for development. So what I need to do now is take that spike, check out development. I just set up an Aspire project with a gateway. Next step, auth. Oh, control tower. Oh, okay. Oh no, you're diverting onto figuring out that problem. Okay. How's that multi-tenant? I don't understand. I'm just being dense. Okay. 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 So let's make sure this is updated. Foundation is valid. Um, yeah. Okay. So yeah, again, if you have questions, if you have ideas, or you want to know more about what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to ask. Again, um, sorry, I got a headache, and it's just a wave has just hit me. Yeah, we're going to proceed through this. Again, the goal is get this in place, get the other pieces lined up. I don't honestly think this is going to take too long to do. I think there's a lot of pieces, and it might seem intimidating, but they are independent pieces that can be built and done. I'm probably going to create a few different stories along the way, a few different branches along the way to make sure that they are committed at the right phases. But then we'll build towards getting a release out in the next 2 weeks that fixes a few of the things, corrects some of the behaviors. Actually, I do need to, while I'm thinking about it, I do need to create an item. And again, from a workflow perspective, is this the right place? Is this the right way to be adding these planning items? Should these be things like, I need to correct uh, the default status of a planning item because it's now not lining up. So it shouldn't let you commit it to a sprint unless it is attached. It has a valid status. Um, so is that a planning item? I don't know, but basically, like a task here, right? It's defaulting to the wrong status. That would fix the process. So let's do task defaulting to wrong status. So at this point, the planning item stops being a planning item. It's essentially a story. When I create a new task, the status, the initial status is not correctly set. And if I move that to a sprint, the item will disappear. Actually, that's because I'm not putting. I'm defaulting the data so that it appears in the store. That's a side effect. 01. Let's do by the 10th, 2025. Actually, designed something today to 2015. That's me. That's client behavior. So we do need to deal with that. Requirements when I adding task should not move to should not disappear. Default status of a task is ready for development, which is actually wrong. Tasks need review anyway. When creating a task in the store, screen shows no status. I should be prevented from saying, well, the actual fix is I should see the status accurately represented when navigating. Again, the actual cause here is that when I create the task, I add it to the store. I send it off to the server, but I create it in the store manually. The status I'm setting it with there is not correct. So that when I go into the store, when I go into the tasks, sorry, and I select a task and say add it to the sprint, it's using the store. It's not making a server callback because it thinks it's current. And what that means is that is going to pick up the wrong status because the server will default it to ready for development, right? Whereas what I created to the store, I'm creating it as unassigned. And what that means is it's going to have an incorrect status so that when I set the sprint, it adds it, but now it's disappeared because the status is, it's got a sprint assigned, which means it won't show in the backlog, but the sprint won't see it because it's not in a status that it understands how to see. So the correct fix here is just to set that default status. So create set status to ready for development. Also, you notice that you didn't see a list of associated requirements. The planning item is linked to the task when it's created through this method. So if I go here now, you'll see there's no planning item listed, but it did come from a planning item. That's because it's using the client version. I haven't actually set that data up. So when I click here now, you'll see this doesn't have anything. It doesn't have a name here because that's using the version I've got in the store. If I go here and change this to ready for development, it will work. It will actually make the call to the backend because it knows how to update this because it's got an ID that it can use. But it will update it appropriately. So to fix it right the second, you need to go and set that to ready for development before you assign the sprint. But we'll get that fixed, right? So let's go over here, introducing tenant permissions. Let's do create a security component. Let's get this done or at least underway by the end of the stream. So I'm going to leave the spike sat there because I want to use those components afterwards. I don't think that spike's pushed, so it's fine. Create a new branch. This is going to be feature. Add security components. We have the application. The application has components, right? Security is going to live at this level right now. And again, if you don't agree with the word, if you don't agree with me putting the word security in this, I'd be interested to know, what would you label this? Does this make sense to you? You know, if you're following along, obviously. To me, it is security. What day is it, by the way? Ah, it's Wednesday. So to do this, I'm going to create a new solution folder. Add solution folder. We're going to label it security. And we're going to go here. I'm going to create a new folder. Security. This is going to be an independent database. Just as with everything else, it's going to have its own. So each component of the system has its own source of truth. These are not microservices. This is more of a distributed monolith in its current form. They don't make sense as microservices right this second. If there was tied to workflows, if there was more eventing, like it's not an event-based architecture. It kind of is event driven. But yeah, so each one of these has its own database, good or bad, right or wrong, I don't know, but it does work, and I like this design. It makes sense. It does allow me to swap out the individual technologies here, like right this second. Yeah, it's my way. So the common path here is we create a 000 script, right? This is that, and it adds the user. We have one user for everything right this second. That's okay. It creates the database. There we go. There's the database, and we'll go with SQL Server for this because it makes sense. Right this second, what I've said is on create security component, I'm going to create the structure and create the database. So the structure being right now we have security domain. That will be the entities that are relating to this. Now, because I don't have .NET 9 installed. Interesting. Huh. Because each of these components is independent, I can upgrade or I can build on newer technologies, these new components. So I can change the technology, I can change the platform, I can independently upgrade them and test them. So it does give me a lot of flexibility in that respect. That's interesting. I have not installed 9 yet. Oh well, doesn't really hurt us. .8 is fine. And the reason I want to do the domain piece specifically here is entities, right? That's how we build one of these. We need an entity. So we need a permission right? And a permission is public int ID. It is public period identifier. So if you've not seen this before in this stream, I attach two IDs essentially to every entity. The ID here is an internal ID used in this database for that entity. So I can refer to it by an actual auto-incrementing ID. I can trace that. That never gets exposed beyond this system. If this permission is to be published, and ultimately, don't forget, this permission is going to come from another system, right? Something else will own the list of permissions, and this will just consume it as an available list of permissions. Actually, in that long term, this system wouldn't even need to store this. Yeah, that's not, it doesn't need to be in here. If I'm going to make Control Tower own this aspect of security, in reality, this does not even care about, that cares about user permissions. But if Control Tower is going to control the list of permissions, then security and view will consume those permissions independently. The discussion there started because I started thinking about the identifier. So there's no benefit in ever creating the permissions table in this database because it doesn't care about it, right? You're not going to query these databases in a common form. You're not going to say, oh, well, go and get me the list of users and get me their names, their emails, and their security permissions. If you want that, you're going to consume Kafka, and a reporting database is going to tell you that, right? So we can build a database off that feeds off Kafka and consumes all the messages and consolidates all the data and puts it in a nicely indexed, sorted form so we can do reporting on it, right? That's the design. You don't have to have the user information in here the same way you don't have to have the permission in here. You just need to know what the permissions are assigned to that user in there. So let's create the structure at least for the user permission. So tenant user permission. Is that what that is? Does it matter that it's tenant user? Is it implicit? I think it's implicit. So to this system, it's just a permission. And I know I just created that, deleted that, and then now I'm creating it again, but I'm going through the thought process here, right? So a permission, as far as security is concerned, is a public int ID. I'm going to put identifier on there, but I'm not entirely sure that I need identifier in this scenario. It is a public GUID tenant identifier, a public GUID user identifier, and a public GUID permission identifier. Seems this might be the closest thing we've got to a microservice in the end anyway, because it's going to be kind of tiny for right now. So we have a permission, and a permission, as far as this component is concerned, is the grouping of that information. That is what represents a permission in the system. So over here, we've created our database. Let's create a table. So let's go over here, drop that, go over here to SQL Server, create a new database. This is ls. Actually, I can just run the script. It's kind of the point of it. Okay. There we go. Let's go ls security. Go in here. Let's add that table now. New DBL. Come on. DBL. New table. Permissions. New column. ID. Int. Not null. Identity. Set as a primary key. Radio Patrick, good morning. How's things? New column. And again, to the point, it's going to be identifier. This is going to be a unique identifier. Not null. New expression, new ID. That doesn't matter. We're going to override it anyway. Coding Craftsman, good morning. How's things? So we got identifier. It helps if you spell it right. So again, now we're going to add tenant identifier, unique identifier, not null, user identifier, not null, permission, permission identifier. That's going to be the most confusing of the names, because that sounds like it's cyclical, self-referencing, self-referential. It's not. It is a global. It's sharing the global reference. This is the security component's representation of those permissions. Do well. Trying to wake up this morning. Got training in a couple of hours. Ugh. Training. Okay, so that's all we need right this second, right? And again, indexes and stuff on these tables don't really matter as much, because I'm going to be inserting into these more often than not, and I'm going to be selecting from them based upon their ID pretty quickly, or identifier at the very minimum, quickly enough that I'm not going to be necessary. I mean, identifier might be the only one. Let's add an index on that just to speed that up. Right, so let's do that. So let's do the SQL generator. No, let's not do the SQL generator. Let's do the SQL script generate DDL to clipboard. So that generates that query, and then let's go over here and add the SQL 001 permissions.sql. So again, if you're following along at all, this table is stored in the security component at this level. This is going to be the assigned user permissions. The permission I select in the UI is the GUID that's going to be selected and assigned there. So it's not going to be, this identifier here, which may or may not actually be necessary, is only to represent this set of data, not to represent the permission itself. This permission identifier represents the actual permission this calls back to. And again, you wouldn't use this database to query that information. So, yeah. So there's the basic structure, right? So we have create the structure, create the database. Let's create the bare minimum of the context, because I'm not going to get much more done. So we need a source security infrastructure. This takes ages down at the bottom. Wow. Yeah, I probably need to clear some warnings out. 1,300 warnings. No referencing exception stuff. I think it might be that time. You do not want to work, do you? I know. So this is going to be the context. This is going to be the snooze that for now. Contexts. So again, putting in the bare minimum infrastructure here to make this work. Security DB context. AF core. So DB context options, security DB context, options, base. Oh, DB context, options. There we go. And then we need public DB set of permission, reference domain, permissions, set. Yeah. Okay. That should be fine. Try this again. I don't think I'm missing anything particularly off that. Mars, good morning. How are you doing? Yeah, we probably do want to do configuration anyway. It's pretty much a necessary piece. Yep. And then let's do the repository. Security DB, security repository. So in my application, you can register your organization, and you could be present in more than one tenant, right? So I could have many tenants that I'm actually a part of. So if I'm sharing tenants, I don't want the same permissions to be set across all tenants. So based upon the tenant I'm in, I should have the permissions applied for that tenant. So if I'm allowed to create a planning item inside of this tenant, but I go into your tenant, I don't want that permission. That might not be a permission you want for me, so you disable that permission for me in there. So it's allowing me to control those things on a per tenant basis, and the way that's going to happen is the gateway is going to apply the permissions. Tenant is a partitioning of the data. So my company, if I sign up for my company's data is not going to be merged in with your data, right? So that's what I mean by tenant. So right now everything does live inside of a single database, but it's partitioned based upon a tenant identifier. This is pretty simple. Public class, T entity, security DB context, context. Cool. I've been looking for non-game programmer everything, so glad I found you. Nice. Is that one? Using shared repositories. That's interesting. Uses that. Okay. Okay, it's just catching up. Okay. So interesting. So as an introduction, this is Liquid Sky. This is my project management and planning platform that I've been building for the past year. Basically, the idea being that you add planning in here, you add requirements in there, and then you can build tasks off of those requirements. And right now, I am kind of working through adding this security component in here. So this is using the application. So we're at the point where the application's big enough to support building the application and tracking the changes and stuff required to build the application. So iterating over improvements and features now. So this is necessary to be able to support multi-tenancy properly and to go forward have a better security model. So I'm live 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday, with some overlap of the 9 a.m. part most days. Thank you for the follow, Mars. Appreciate it. There is a Discord, so if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, if you want to see more offline and discuss more of these things offline, you're more than welcome to join the Discord. That is linked in the cards below for both YouTube and Twitch. All the past videos, this is video 169 on this particular piece. And we also did over 18 deployment videos when we were doing the Kubernetes piece a couple of weeks ago. So right now, this is all deployed to Kubernetes cluster that's Kubernetes box that's sat behind me in its current form. Lots of different technologies, good or bad, right or wrong. That is the technologies that I've decided to use. So what we're working on right this second is this component here, adding the security piece in so that we can apply permissions per request to the token and allow us to understand that at these levels what you're allowed to do. So essentially, create security component in order to support permissions within structure and to hold a list of available permissions, create structure, create the database. The structure doesn't live here. And that's the challenging part. On the topic of non-programming, game programming, Mars, you might also like, it will let me shout out at the same time, right? Oh no, 1 minute 44. Findle is another great .NET developer. It sounds really self-centered. I mean, he's a great .NET developer. Does all sorts of classic stuff and modern stuff, working with Blazors and other technologies that I don't use on this stream primarily. So if you're interested in following along there, also One Lion, who I wanted to shout out there, but I am limited as well. One Lion is also a .NET developer who streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and does work projects and some bot work and things like that. And he's a fantastic developer. I'm gonna wait that 2 minutes out right this second. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's been sick over the winter break, so he's not been streaming recently. But yes. Um, so this structure, well, while I'm finishing this up, this structure is something I need to figure out where I'm going to put it temporarily, because it really should come from a central source. Because I need to have that structure represented. I need to have that data represented in here and also in here from the permissions perspective. That's interesting. This needs the ID and the actual string attached to it, and this needs the string so I can describe it. So at the very least, what would happen is view is got the view script. We need to go to the view database and add. So the view will not have. It's interesting. The view will have permissions in a different form. What was that? Something pinged. Um, to 015. Yep, that's it. Permissions.sql. So we're going to need to add. Oh no, it should be 16. Yeah. For some reason, sounds getting in my way. So this will add. This permissions will be ID, identifier, name, right? So this will be the actual list of permissions. We're not going to deal with grouping right now. We're just going to show the permissions in an order of name. Then we will need another, which will be user permissions. So this will be 017 user permissions.sql. And this will be essentially what we call permissions in the security context. Because again, in the security context, that's a permission. A permission is a pairing, a grouping of tenant plus user plus permission, right? That is an actual permission. But in this context, there's the list of available permissions and the user permissions. These are the ones that are assigned to the tenant. These are the ones that will be joined in. So this will be ID, identifier, tenant identifier. And again, when you say identifier in my system, an identifier is always something that is shared across the components. An ID is always an internal thing. It's just a differentiator, right? Now, the actual table will be permission ID, user ID, tenant ID, because it will resolve the identifiers somewhere. So we'll figure that out afterwards. Because when it's internal, it can actually resolve those. It doesn't need to have the public identifiers, because those things will have their own identifiers. So if I need to produce that data, I can do. So this will look more like this here. Yeah, so we'll need to structure them out. And again, Control Tower will own those pieces. So for those who are new to the stream, this is not an open source project. There are components of this that are open source. The Kafka components that are built, the inbots, the outbot stuff that I built for Kafka and for Mediator to support distributed the distributed pieces a little bit more. They are available as open source components, and there'll probably be more as we go along. But I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to share diagrams. And as I said, if you are a subscriber to the platform, a subscriber right now, you are able to log in and to Discord, and you will see specific forums set up for support. Once this next phase goes live, I'll open it up a little wider, and you won't need to be a sub to see those forums. But yeah, I do want to give something back to those people who have subbed to me and supported me for a long time. So that's why that's sub restricted right this second. But anyway, that is essentially done for what we've got. I need to figure out the other pieces. So tomorrow, what we'll get on with, or later today, I'll get on with, and then tomorrow we'll continue. Morning, Frankberg. Hope you're well. We'll get on with creating the API and start to build out those pieces, and then we'll get to the user, the view. These are kind of big, but they will fall into place pretty quickly. So there we go. So unfortunately, I have to call it here. I have a day job, and it's not very good to be missing meetings. So again, if you haven't been there before, One Lion streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and on Mondays and Wednesdays streams his work projects, which has been some fascinating stuff. Yeah, I know, work and stuff. Yeah, very worth checking out. One Lion is a great streamer and a great personality, and it's just a great place to go hang out. So I would highly recommend it. I love hanging out there. And on Fridays, does community streams. So I will be back tomorrow for more of this again. Let's go raid Anna today. Anna is working today on a writing platform. So always working on interesting tools on a stream. So thank you very much for joining me. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. Bye all.